It's a win-win situation for you, though, isn't it? Because you get to say, well, I abstained, I didn't vote yes, because you couldn't have known that 411 were going to vote yes.
No, that's
you could have gone in there and said, I'm going to vote against.
No, forgive me, I did say that. I did say that. And I'll tell you how I knew that. I knew that because everybody knew by that point that the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrat Party and the Conservative Party were all in favour of HS. It all said so. They're all, by the way, still saying so. So it was blindingly obvious that that second reading vote would be carried overwhelmingly. And in terms of a win-win situation, I've got to tell you from where I'm sitting, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like I'm in a really difficult position. And I could have made meetings like this much, much easier for myself if I'd resigned from government in a blaze of glory, got front-page headlines in the Courier, and everyone would have said, good for him. He resigned, he stood up for his constituents. How many of you, how many of these people would have been better off as a result? Not a single one. And I have to think sometimes, as all members of Parliament do, about the best way to serve my constituents. And sometimes that's not about making yourself feel better, not even about making you feel better. It's about being in the best position to help. And that's what I try to do. Now, you can criticise that, and you've got a chance, some of you, to make a judgment about that in a few days' time. But I hope you'll also take into account that on HS2, regardless of what happens at second reading, there's a huge amount of extra work still to be done. And anyone who thinks that the right thing for a Member of Parliament to do is to wave a placard, cast a vote, put their feet up and say, job done, that's entirely wrong. We've got a lot of work to do. We've got to make sure that this line does as little damage as possible. We've got to make sure that Southam businesses still have access to their customers when construction is underway. All of those things are hugely important. I've spent probably more than half my time as a Member of Parliament on HS2 over the last 5 years. I expect to do it again. I've been to lots and lots of meetings, had lots and lots of conversations, written lots of letters, spoken to lots of ministers, done all of that you'd expect your Member of Parliament to do. And I've got to say, I've not seen any of these gentlemen involved in that process up to now. So it's all very interesting to hear them all tell you now that they're very keen to get involved with HS2. But when I go to action group meetings, I don't tend to meet them. Thank you. Come back to Richard.
Jeremy, let me take me back to 2010. And I asked you at St Francis Church Hall in Kenilworth whether you would be following the example of Chris White and Dan Biles, who are two local Conservative MPs who had already declared that they would be voting against it. Let me also remind you that I have been to, notwithstanding the fact that I have a full-time job, I have been to HS2 Select Committee meeting down in London when local residents have been petitioning. One of the biggest things that they've been petitioning on is a small village in Burton Green, which some of you may know is sort of north of Kenilworth, quite close to Tile Hill railway station, where HS2 is due to go right through the middle of it, of the Greenway. They have been petitioning for a deep bore tunnel. Jeremy's been supporting them, I have to say, in that petition, but they haven't got it, and HS2 have told them that.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I want to make sure we get 2 more questions in, so I want to keep it fairly brief. Harry.
Yeah, I just want to come back on. You say you abstained, Jeremy. You abstained. Really, what is the practical difference? You didn't really. You weren't thinking about the constituents of Kenilworth and Southam when you abstained. You abstained because you didn't want to upset your ministerial career in government. And you say, oh, well, what practical difference would that have made? That really is a very defeatist attitude towards that.
What's the answer?
The answer is that you should have stood up for the constituents of Kenilworth and Southam and voted against the project.
No, that's not the answer. What difference would it have made?
Just as Chris White did, just as
what difference does that make?
And it may not have made a huge amount of difference. You shouldn't stop fighting things on principle simply because, oh, it's not going to make much difference. That's a defeatist attitude.
Again, let's be realistic about it. I've never said I'm against high-speed rail. I've said it to you again tonight. So if anybody here is thinking I want a member of Parliament who's against HS2 and high-speed rail in principle, they shouldn't vote for me. They shouldn't have voted for me in 2010. But there is a question, isn't there, about how much better off you'd be with any of these. And I'm afraid it's worth mentioning to Harry, there are 2 members of Parliament who now sit in Parliament as UKIP members of Parliament. Neither of them voted against HS2. And in the 2010 general election, UKIP were in favour not just of one high-speed railway line, but 3. They spotted it's unpopular now.
Nine of them are standing in the
Just very quickly about the Jeremy made a comment that we haven't been involved in HS2 action committee groups or in casework. I've been involved in action committee work in Kenilworth School. I was attended there 2 years ago. I've been involved in casework, and you know this, Jeremy, with Bob and the falconry business. And we worked together on that. And actually, this was a falconry business in Covington that was getting affected by HS2, and they got offered no compensation. So I organised HS2 representatives from London to come over to the falconry business and visit. So we worked together collaboratively to try and get a means of understanding. And then what we did was we petitioned in Parliament, got a letter from Patrick McLaughlin, the Transport Secretary, and he said, no, you will get no compensation. Well, we still persisted. And you know what happened? Because you tried, you're not a defeatist attitude. He got all of his full compensation. The committee told HS2, go back and draw full compensation. And that's what you do when you work hard on your constituency.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. Courtney, please. Courtney Harbour.
The fact that all the candidates are male proves there's a problem with representation of women in politics.
Okay, so does the fact that all the candidates are male prove there is a problem with the representation of women in politics? So we'll go to Rob, the party with the Green leader and a Green MP, female leader and a female MP. Rob.
Well, you've taken the wind out of my sails, because I was about to say we're the only party here with 100% female representation, both in terms of leadership and membership. But yes, you're right. There is a problem with women being underrepresented in Parliament, and that is certainly something that the Green Party would be. Well, we're already putting forward lots of female candidates. Unfortunately, you've drawn the short straw and you've got me. But if you were voting in Warwick and Leamington, we have a young, enthusiastic, 22-year-old Afro-Caribbean young lady who's represented the Green Party. So that's just one example, but there are hundreds around the country.
Okay, thank you.
Harry.
Yeah, I think women are underrepresented. It's not very clear why that is the case. I think historically there have been in the past sexist attitudes in politics which have not assisted women. Certainly in my party there are no less representation of women than there are in any other party, and we would try and ensure that women are represented more than they have been. My wife believes that it's all because men like the sound of their own voices too much and don't do enough and get things done, whereas women do. And politics, she thinks, is all about too much talking and not enough doing. That's why she's not in politics. And
What do you think about your party policy on, or discussion about scrapping discrimination legislation though? Because lots of that legislation has protected women, enabled women to increase in their careers, and your leader says most of that doesn't need to be there. So do you agree with
what
that?
he was talking about was with particular reference to the employment anti-discrimination legislation. I think the trouble with with discrimination laws. And it's a complicated issue. It's more complicated than people think. Discrimination laws actually can sometimes cause more of a problem than they are designed to prevent, because it doesn't really stop the discrimination being exercised in a much more subtle means. And so I wonder whether really they serve very much purpose other than causing actually more discrimination than they're designed to prevent, because it doesn't stop an employer or anybody in a position of power of some kind or another discriminating, but doing so in an extremely subtle manner.
Okay.
And that's the problem with discrimination law.
I have a question here. You are both white and male, so what discrimination have you faced, and how much authority do you have over this discussion?
Okay, thank you, Emily. Just not to discriminate. Can you just put your hands up? That would be appreciated.
Shall I? Yes. Well, I have to say, to my eternal disgrace, I am white and I am male. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think anyone has any more authority to discuss anything than anyone else. I think it's a free country. We have free speech in this country. I'm entitled to my opinion. You're entitled to yours. So there we are.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Valley.
Okay, thank you for that point. I think it was quite ironic yesterday when the same question was asked in Kenilworth, that Jeremy referred to all of his panellists as white middle-aged men.
Should have gone to Specsavers.
Yeah. For a second I had to check. And also present was a very successful head, Afro-Caribbean Hayden Abbott of Kenilworth School. And he made a pun to say he was a middle-aged man with a white beard.
Okay, what about female?
Hey, look, I'll be quick with the answer. There is a problem. There's not enough women involved in politics. More women involved in politics makes politics better. It makes it less adversarial, and we get things done. So I will do anything to encourage more female representatives in Parliament.
What about your party, though? Because your party has never had a female leader, and in 2010 there was a female candidate, but I think there was a sense that she wasn't really a viable candidate. So why has Labour never had a female leader if Labour is stronger on this?
It's a good question, and I think we have got very prominent female politicians, Rachel Reeves, for example, Yvette Cooper. They're signalled as future leaders of the Labour Party. We also have all-women shortlist. We've got the highest representation of women in Parliament, and we intend to increase that. We're targeted to increase women representation, so it makes 50% of the Parliamentary Labour Party. It's the right thing to do. It's better for our country. It's better for our politics. That's why I'm supporting the Labour Party policy on this issue.
I think it's Courtney's question on are women underrepresented? Yes, I think it's a systemic issue. The whole system of politics works against women. We do currently have an equalities minister, Liberal Democrat Jo Swinson, who has brought in a number of measures, notwithstanding the fact that she has given birth to a child whilst being minister as well. Not an easy thing to do. Women are underrepresented not just, however, in politics, but also if you look at the number of newspaper editors, the number of company directors, and even in the constituency of Kenilworth and Southam, we have 3 state secondary schools and 1 independent school. 3 of those 4 heads are male, only 1 of them is female. So on a whole range of issues, we need to be tackling the question of representation of women.
The teaching's quite well represented women generally, though, isn't it? It's dominated the profession by women on the whole.
Yes, on the whole, but why is that not happening in education? Women are necessarily rising stock. Forgive me, I don't know nationally what the statistics are.
There's an issue with leadership at primary school level in women representation.
But there are a number of measures. I think one of the solutions to this, as far as the corporate sector is concerned, is for businesses to be required, as they will be under Jo Swinson's new small business bill, to publish the average rates of pay for men and for women. There is still a 19% pay gap there. And this is the 21st century, it's 2015. It's years since Made in Dagenham and all those people campaigned for equal pay, so it's still a big issue out there.
What about in politics, though? Because Lib Dems have a smaller proportion of female MPs than the other major parties. So
they do. I'm certainly in favour of having all-female shortlists out there. On our local committee, we have more women than men. and certainly well represented at councillor level. We just need to get them coming forward and encouraging them as much as we can do to want to be MPs.
Thank you. Where's Courtney? Courtney, what are your thoughts about this then, from what you've heard?
I think we should be more to address the balance. There's only 148 female MPs compared to 502 males. I think once this balance is addressed, I think women will feel more represented in society, as well as just in politics.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And I don't disagree with what my colleagues have said, and as Valley helpfully points out, although we are all male, we're not all white. I failed to spot that last night, but it's been pointed out to me. But look, the issue around female representation in politics is hugely important, and in Parliament, even more so. But if you want to address it, I don't think the right answer actually is something like all women shortlists. I think that's fairly insulting, frankly, to women. I think that if you are good enough to get there, you should be good enough to get there, regardless of your gender, and you shouldn't need a helping hand from whichever party it is giving you an advantage. But we should remove the disadvantages. And the brutal truth is that some of the things that put women off going into Parliament are the way in which Parliament behaves, the nature of debate that takes place in Parliament. You might argue that none of us are helping the cause much right now, but we certainly need to think about that. And we need to think about the hours that Parliament sits. Right now, Parliament will sit until 10 o'clock at night on a Monday, particularly. Now, if that's the case, and it continues to be the case, women with children in particular will find it very difficult to combine their childcare responsibilities with their work as a Member of Parliament. And yes, I know, of course it should be a much more equal split in terms of childcare, but we know, don't we, that the predominant situation at the moment is that women are responsible for childcare more than men. And you have to think about those practical things if you want to attract women into Parliament and into politics, as we should. We're making progress in the right direction. So, for example, my party will have a third of its candidates at the election in a few days' time who are female. Good, but not good enough. We've got a lot more progress to make.
You've only got 16% female.
Absolutely. And you've got to put that right.
It's a long way, isn't it? Okay, very quick, Valerie.
Yeah, I mean, the wider point is we need greater representation from all areas of the country. We need greater representation from people who are educated in the state sector. Too many politicians are privately educated. Too many politicians are career politicians. Too many politicians are from the London and the South East. We need to make sure that we have more of a regional balance, more of a balance between people from all areas of the country and all areas of society. So, for example, you as future leaders have a realistic ambition to become our future leaders in Parliament. That's the promise we hold. That's the promise we must commit to. We need to increase wider representation, have wider representation in Parliament.
Thank you. Right, on to the next question, which is Harry Stewart. Harry.
Should voting age be dropped to 16?
Okay, so should the voting age for general elections, as we saw in Scotland with the referendum, should the voting age be dropped to 16? Richard?
This is quite an interesting one. The soundings that I've taken on the doorstep of this are actually more mixed than I thought they were. Even amongst people who are 16, 17 and 18, than I would have expected older people over the age of 55 to say, no, they shouldn't be having a vote at all at the age of 16. I watched with great interest and delight at the extent to which, during the Scottish referendum last year, people who were 16 and 17 engaged in the debate in a very mature way. My natural inclination and the Liberal Democrat view is actually to encourage people under 16 and 17 to vote if they get the opportunity to do it. We would seek to bring in legislation to do that. Whether it should be age 16 or 17 or saying it should be people who are in year 12 and year 13, slightly semantic issue on that. There was an interesting programme a couple of weeks back on the radio with Professor Michael Sandel, who was actually arguing in Westminster to say that people who are under the age of 25, and bear in mind that people who are under the age of 35 at least vote in far fewer percentages. Only 45% of them voted in the general election of 2010, compared to people over the age of 55, where it was 75%. That's why you get so many darn policies that favour older people. If younger people vote more, then you'll get more policies that favour younger people. Michael Sandel was arguing that people under the age of 25 should actually get 2 votes and people over the age of 75 should only get half a vote, which I thought was taking it a little bit far.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
Yeah, I think I just echo everything that Richard just said. I completely agree that there should be reduce the voting age to 16, because we saw how engaged 16 and 17-year-olds were in the Scottish referendum. So
we did a survey of the students, and only about 16% agreed that it should be dropped from present. So actually, many of the students don't feel that way. So how does that change your opinion?
Well, there's certainly a problem with young people feeling disengaged in politics, which is illustrated by the figures that Richard has mentioned. And so we certainly do need to do more to engage young people. And really, I always come back to the actual voting system, which is an unrepresentative system. Where in a constituency like Kenilworth, I know Jeremy's going to disagree with me on this, but it's almost certain that Jeremy's going to get voted in. And so you could say, even coming back to something that Jeremy said earlier, what's the point of voting then? Because what difference is it going to make? Well, that is the feeling of a lot of people. And so what we actually need is a proper proportional representation, like single transferable vote, so that everybody's vote counts and everybody is represented.
Would that not just lead to more coalitions or more, perhaps, no majority governments though?
Absolutely, yeah, and I don't think that's a bad thing, because you wouldn't get the wild swings you have at the moment, going from Labour to Conservative, back to Labour, back to Conservative, with education suffering at every turn.
Okay, Jeremy.
Yeah, it's amazing how much amazing how much in favour of smaller parties having more power smaller parties are, isn't it? Look, I think the answer to the question is yes. I think we should reduce the voting age to 16. And the reason I think that is that it seems to me, if you can pay tax at 16 as you can, you should have a say in how it's spent. If you can serve in the armed forces at 16 as you can, you should have a say in where the armed forces go around the world. So I think there is a good pro-democratic reason for changing the voting age down to 16. But I agree with others that that's not the only thing we have to do. We have to do a lot more than that in order to engage people of any age in politics. And that's more about not when you can vote, it's about having something to vote for. And that's the obligation I think we all have as politicians.
So is that going to be Conservative policy then?
No, because at the moment I would say I'm in a minority in the Conservative Party. But you asked me for my view, and that's my view. And it hasn't always been my view, incidentally. And what's probably changed my view is, as a Member of Parliament, being able to come out to schools like this and talk to 16 and 17-year-olds about politics. It's been very apparent to me that they have pretty good ideas about what they want to see happen in this country. They have a pretty good awareness of what's going on, and I think that should be rewarded in the franchise. And for those who say, and there are some, well, 16 and 17-year-olds, far too irresponsible, don't take any interest, aren't mature enough. I have to tell you, I've met some 36 and 46-year-olds who aren't mature enough to have the vote. We still give it to them.
Harry.
Yeah, I think the voting age should remain at 18, and the reason why I think that is because it's a more complex issue than people think. I think that younger people, they're no less, as Jeremy said, they're no less responsible than older people on the whole. But the problem is that younger people have, by virtue of their age alone, less experience of life. And I think that the 16-year-old is going to have on the whole, as a limited experience of life, live with his or her parents on the whole. They're not going to have to make the financial decisions, the decisions that adults have to make every day of their lives. In my view, the voting age should remain at 18.
Okay.
It may not be popular with this particular audience, but that's what I think.
Okay, I think we've got a comment here, yes. We've got
a few of you have said that we should drop the voting age to 16, but couldn't that have a knock-on effect of lowering the age for drinking, lowering the age of gambling? Because beforehand, when everything was except was 21 being an adult, and then it went down to 18, couldn't the same happen now? being accepted as an adult when you're 60.
So what's your personal view? What do you think about the voting age?
I think it should stay where it is, but
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
It's a difficult
there are
question.
different opinions and there are different views and there are different ways in which you can take this question. And I was just interested in people that thought about the consequences which is being taken.
Thank you. I think that's a really good way to finish, so a round of applause. Right, that's it. So thank you very much all for all the comments and questions and things, and thank you again to all of our panelists. Can we give them all one of the round of applause? Thank you.